I pulled into the gravel driveway and killed the engine. Through the windshield, I could see it. A U-Haul truck, parked right in front of my cottage. My cottage, the one Martha and I had built 32 years ago on the shore of Lake Windermere. My hands were still on the steering wheel. I sat there for a moment, watching. The truck's back door was open. I could see furniture inside, boxes. Someone was moving in. I stepped out of my truck. The March air was cold. Snow still covered the ground in patches. The lake was frozen. I walked toward the cottage slowly. The front door was open. I could hear voices inside. "Greg?" I called out. My brother-in-law appeared in the doorway. He was wearing a heavy jacket and work gloves. Behind him, I could see Linda, his wife, Martha's sister. They both stopped when they saw me. "Robert," Greg said. His voice was flat. Not surprised, not apologetic, just flat. "What are you doing here?" I stared at him. "What am I doing here? This is my cottage. What are you doing here?" Linda stepped forward. Her face was red. From the cold or from something else, I couldn't tell. "Martha promised us this place. You know she did." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not from the weather. "Martha never promised you anything." "She did." Linda's voice was rising. 2 years ago, before she got sick, she said when the time came, we could have it. I shook my head. "That's not true." Greg crossed his arms. "Linda and Martha talked about it. Multiple times. Martha knew we loved this place. She knew we'd take care of it." "Take care of it?" I looked past them. Through the open door, I could see they'd already moved furniture out of the living room. Martha's reading chair, the bookshelf I'd built for her. "You're not taking care of it. You're taking it." "We have a right to be here," Linda said. Her chin was up, defiant. "No, you don't." I pulled out my phone. "This cottage is in my name. It's been in my name since we built it. Martha left everything to me in her will. I have the documents." Greg's jaw tightened. "Wills can be contested." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that Martha promised it to us. On the grounds that you're not using it. You haven't been here in months. We're family. We should have it." I felt the anger rising, slow and hot. "Get out." "No," Linda said. She stepped closer to the door, blocking it. "We're not leaving. We've already started moving in. You can't stop us." "I can call the RCMP." "Go ahead." Greg pulled out his own phone. "We'll tell them Martha promised us this place. We'll tell them you're trying to keep family property from family. See how that goes." I looked at both of them. Linda with her arms crossed, Greg with his phone out, ready. They'd planned this. They'd waited until they thought I wouldn't be here. They'd brought a truck. They'd started moving. They thought I'd just let them have it. I turned and walked back to my truck. Got in. Started the engine. As I drove away, I could see them in the rearview mirror, standing in the doorway, watching me leave. They thought they'd won. The drive back to Calgary took 3 hours. 3 hours of white-knuckle fury. My hands gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I kept seeing Linda's face. That defiant look, the audacity of it. Martha had been gone for 14 months. 14 months of grief. Of waking up to an empty house. Of eating meals alone. Of seeing her things everywhere and knowing she'd never touch them again. And now her sister was trying to take our cottage. I'd met Linda the same week I'd met Martha, 35 years ago, at a family barbecue in Toronto. Linda was younger by 3 years, louder, always had an opinion, always needed to be involved. Martha used to say, Linda was passionate. I'd learned over the years that passionate meant exhausting. Greg had come into the picture later, 28 years ago. Nice enough guy at first, worked in sales, always had a new business idea, always needed a loan. Martha and I had helped them out a few times over the years. Down payment on their first house. Greg's failed restaurant venture. Linda's attempt at starting a boutique. We'd never asked for the money back. Family helps family, Martha always said. But this wasn't help. This was theft. I pulled into my driveway in Calgary just after 6. The house was dark, cold. I let myself in and stood in the entryway. Everything was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Quiet, empty. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. David Chen had handled Martha's estate. Good guy. Thorough. He answered on the third ring. Robert, how are you? I need your help. I explained what had happened. The U-Haul, Greg and Linda, their claim that Martha had promised them the cottage. David was quiet for a moment. Do you have any documentation that disputes their claim? I have the deed. I have Martha's will. Everything's in my name. That's good. But if they're claiming a verbal promise, it could get complicated. Do you have any witnesses? Anyone Martha might have talked to about the cottage? I thought about it. Martha never mentioned giving them the cottage. Not once. We talked about it sometimes. About maybe selling it someday, or passing it down to our nephew. But never to Linda and Greg. Your nephew? Daniel, my brother's son. He's in Vancouver. Martha was close to him. I'd recommend reaching out to him. Get a statement. Also, check if Martha had any written correspondence. Emails, letters, anything that shows her intentions. What do I do about them being there now? Technically, they're trespassing. You can call the police. But that might escalate things quickly. Family disputes can get messy, expensive. I don't care about expensive. I know. But think carefully. Linda was Martha's sister. If you go nuclear, there's no coming back from that. I closed my eyes, felt the weight of it. She's already gone nuclear, David. She's trying to steal our cottage. Then, let's do this properly. I'll draft a cease and desist letter. We'll send it certified mail. Give them 7 days to vacate. If they don't, we file for an injunction. Then we can get the police involved with legal backing. 7 days? They could destroy the place in 7 days. Do you have anyone who could check on the property? Document what's happening. I thought about it. There's a neighbor, Bill Sanderson. He lives 2 cottages down, year-round resident. Call him. Ask him to keep an eye on things. Take photos if he can. We'll need evidence if this goes to court. Court. The word sat heavy in my chest. Okay, I said. Draft the letter. After I hung up, I sat there. The coffee had gone cold. Outside, the sun was setting. The house felt even emptier than before. I called Bill. He answered quickly. Robert, haven't heard from you in a while. How've you been? I've been better. Bill, I need a favor. I explained the situation. Bill was quiet then. I saw the truck. Wondered what was going on. Didn't realize it was Greg and Linda. Thought maybe you'd hired movers or something. Can you keep an eye on the place? Let me know if anything happens. Of course. Absolutely. I'll take some photos too. Document what they're doing. Thank you. Robert, I'm sorry. About all of this. Martha was good people. This isn't right. I felt my throat tighten. No, it's not. The next week was hell. Bill sent me photos every day. Greg and Linda moving more furniture in, replacing Martha's things with their own. They'd taken down the photos from the walls. Our wedding picture. The photo of Martha and me at the Calgary Stampede. The one of us on the lake in our canoe. All gone. David sent the cease and desist letter. Certified mail. I got confirmation it was delivered on the 3rd day. Greg called me that night. I was in the garage, going through boxes, looking for anything that might help. Old letters from Martha. Anything. This is ridiculous, Greg said. No hello. No preamble. You're really going to lawyer up over this? You're really going to try to steal my cottage? We're not stealing anything. Martha promised it to us. Linda's her sister. You know how close they were. They weren't that close. You don't know what you're talking about. His voice was hard now, angry. You were always working, always busy. You don't know half the conversations they had. Martha told me everything. She told you what you wanted to hear. She told Linda the truth. I felt the anger spike again. Get out of my cottage. It's not your cottage anymore. We're staying. If you want to fight about it, fine. We'll see you in court. Linda has evidence. Texts, emails. Martha promised her. Then show me. We don't have to show you anything. We'll show the judge. He hung up. I stood there in the garage, holding the phone, shaking. Emails, texts. Could Martha have really promised them the cottage? Had there been conversations I didn't know about? No. No, Martha wouldn't have done that. Not without telling me. We'd built that cottage together. Every beam, every window. It was ours. But doubt was creeping in. The cold kind. The kind that kept me up at night. I called Daniel the next morning, Martha's nephew. He was 32 now, software engineer in Vancouver. Good kid. Martha had loved him. Uncle Robert, he said when he answered. I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up? I've been better. Daniel, I need to ask you something. Did Martha ever talk to you about the cottage? About what would happen to it after she was gone? Silence for a moment. She did, actually. Last time I visited. About 6 months before she passed. My heart rate picked up. What did she say? She said she hoped you'd keep it, that it meant so much to both of you. She said maybe someday, if you ever wanted to pass it on, she'd love for me to have it. But that was way down the line. She said it was your place, your memories. I exhaled, felt some of the tension release. She said that? Yeah. She was really clear about it. She said Linda had been asking about it, but that the cottage wasn't Linda's. It was yours and hers. Linda had been asking about it? That's what Aunt Martha said. She seemed frustrated about it, actually. Said Linda didn't understand that some things weren't up for grabs. Would you be willing to put that in writing? For my lawyer? Of course. Whatever you need. We talked for a few more minutes. Daniel promised to email me a statement. After I hung up, I sat there, feeling something close to relief. Martha hadn't promised them anything. Linda had been pushing. Martha had said no. And now Linda was lying about it. I called David, told him about Daniel. He sounded pleased. That's good. That's very good. It contradicts their claim. Combined with the will and the deed, we have a strong case. What's the next step? They have 4 more days to vacate. If they don't, we file for the injunction. Should be straightforward. The cottage is in your name. The will is clear. Unless they can produce actual evidence of Martha's promise, they don't have a leg to stand on. Greg said they have emails and texts. Then they'll have to produce them in court. Discovery will reveal the truth. 4 days. I counted them, each one slower than the last. Bill kept sending photos. Greg and Linda were settling in. They'd brought their own furniture, their own dishes. They were making the cottage theirs. On the 5th day, nothing happened. They didn't leave. I filed the injunction. The court date was set for 3 weeks later. David said it was fast, considering. Usually these things took months. But the judge had seen the documentation, the deed, the will. He'd agreed to an expedited hearing. In the meantime, Greg and Linda stayed at the cottage. Bill reported they were there every day, acting like they owned it. Word got around the family. My brother called, Daniel's father. Robert, what the hell is going on? I explained everything. The U-Haul, the claim, the injunction. My brother was silent for a long moment. Linda's always been difficult. But this is beyond. Did Martha ever talk to you about it? About the cottage? Sure. She loved that place. She used to say it was her and your sanctuary. She never mentioned giving it to Linda. Greg says Martha promised it to them. Greg's full of it. He's been looking for a handout his whole life. I'm not surprised he'd try this. Can I count on you to testify if it comes to that? Absolutely. Whatever you need. More family members called. Martha's cousins. Old friends. Everyone had an opinion. Most were on my side. Some said I should just let it go. That it wasn't worth tearing the family apart. But the family was already torn apart. Linda had done that the moment she'd shown up with that truck. The 3 weeks crawled by. David prepared the case. We had Daniel's statement, my brother's testimony, the deed and will. Photos from Bill showing Greg and Linda moving in without permission. David said we had a strong case. But he also warned me that family disputes were unpredictable. Judges didn't like them. They often pushed for mediation. For compromise. What kind of compromise? I asked. Shared ownership. Alternating use. Financial settlement. I'm not giving them anything. I understand. But be prepared for that possibility. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Martha, about the cottage. about all the summers we'd spent there. The winters, too. Cross-country skiing on the frozen lake, hot chocolate by the fireplace, reading together in the evenings. It was ours, our life, our memories. And Linda was trying to erase it all. The hearing was at the Calgary courthouse. David met me outside. We went through security together, took the elevator to the third floor. Greg and Linda were already there, sitting on a bench outside the courtroom. They had their own lawyer, a woman in a sharp suit. She was talking to them in low tones. Linda saw me first. Her face hardened. She said something to Greg. He looked up. Our eyes met. He looked away. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Plain, fluorescent lights. The judge's bench at the front, tables for each side. We sat. David organized his papers. I kept my hands folded, steady. The judge came in. Everyone stood. She was maybe 55. Dark hair pulled back. Glasses. She looked tired. "This is a petition for injunction," she said, looking at her notes. "Robert Montgomery versus Greg and Linda Patterson. Regarding property at Lake Windermere, Alberta. Mr. Chen, you're representing the petitioner?" David stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "And Miss Wallace, you're representing the respondents?" Linda's lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Let's proceed. Mr. Chen, make your case." David laid it out. Clean, methodical. The cottage was in my name. Had been since we'd built it. Martha's will left everything to me. No mention of any promise to Greg and Linda. We had testimony from Martha's nephew that she'd specifically said the cottage was mine. We had evidence that Greg and Linda had moved in without permission. Trespassing. Unlawful occupation. The judge listened, took notes. When David sat down, she turned to Miss Wallace. "Your response?" Miss Wallace stood. She was confident. Smooth. "Your Honor, while the deed and will are clear, they don't tell the whole story. My clients have evidence that Martha Montgomery made a verbal promise to leave the cottage to them. This promise was made multiple times over several years. It was understood within the family that the cottage would go to Linda Patterson, Martha's sister, upon Martha's death. What evidence do you have of this verbal promise?" Miss Wallace pulled out papers. "We have several text messages between Martha and Linda discussing the cottage. We also have testimony from family friends who heard Martha say she wanted Linda to have the cottage." My stomach dropped. Text messages? I looked at David. He kept his face neutral. The judge looked at the papers. "I'd like to see these messages." Miss Wallace handed them over. The judge read them slowly. Her face didn't change. After a long moment, she looked up. "These messages are vague. They discuss the cottage. Linda expressing interest, Martha responding, but I don't see anywhere that Martha explicitly promises to leave the cottage to Linda." "The implication is clear, Your Honor," Miss Wallace said. "Martha knew Linda loved the cottage. They discussed Linda's plans for it. Martha never contradicted those plans. Not contradicting isn't the same as promising." The judge looked at the messages again. In fact, in one of these messages, Martha says, "We'll see what happens." That doesn't sound like a promise to me. Miss Wallace's confidence wavered. Just slightly. "Your Honor, verbal promises are enforceable under certain circumstances. My clients relied on Martha's promise. They made plans based on it." "What plans?" Miss Wallace hesitated. "They considered the cottage their future retirement home." "Considered, based on conversations that weren't clear promises." The judge set the papers down. "Mr. Chen, you have testimony from Martha's nephew?" David stood. Handed over Daniel's written statement. "Yes, Your Honor. Daniel Montgomery, Martha's nephew. He states that Martha told him the cottage was Robert's, that she hoped it would stay in his hands, that she'd mentioned Linda asking about it, but that it wasn't Linda's to have." The judge read Daniel's statement, looked up at me. "Mr. Montgomery, did your wife ever discuss leaving the cottage to her sister?" I stood. My voice was steady. "No, Your Honor, never. Martha and I built that cottage together. We talked about maybe passing it to Daniel someday, if I decided to sell, but she never mentioned giving it to Linda." "Did Linda ever ask about it, to your knowledge?" Not directly to me, but based on what Martha told Daniel, yes, Linda had been asking. And Martha's response? Martha told Daniel it wasn't up for grabs. The judge nodded, looked at Linda and Greg. Miss Patterson, Mr. Patterson, did Martha ever explicitly tell you, in clear terms, that she was leaving you the cottage? Linda stood. Her face was red. She implied it. Many times. She knew how much we loved the place. She knew we didn't have anything like it. She wanted us to have it. But did she say, "I'm leaving you the cottage"? Linda hesitated. She said we'd take good care of it, that we deserved it. That's not the same as promising to leave it to you. The judge leaned back. Here's what I'm seeing. Robert Montgomery owns the cottage. It's in his name. His late wife's will leaves everything to him. The evidence of a verbal promise is weak at best. Text messages that are vague. No clear statement of intent. Meanwhile, we have testimony that Martha specifically said the cottage was Robert's. Miss Wallace stood quickly. Your Honor, we also have testimony from family friends who heard Martha express her wishes. Submit those testimonies. I'll review them. But based on what I'm seeing now, the injunction is granted. Greg and Linda Patterson have 7 days to vacate the property. All belongings must be removed. The property must be returned to the condition it was in before they moved in. Linda gasped, audibly. Greg put his hand on her arm. Your Honor, please, Miss Wallace said. My clients have already moved in. They've made arrangements. They've invested time and resources. Without legal permission. Mr. Montgomery owns the property. Until and unless a court determines otherwise, he has the right to control access. If your clients wish to continue their claim, they can file a formal lawsuit, but they cannot remain in the property in the meantime. The gavel came down, sharp, final. 7 days. Next case. We stood. The judge left. I felt David's hand on my shoulder. That went well, he said quietly. I looked across the room. Linda was crying. Greg was arguing with Miss Wallace. She was shaking her head, looking frustrated. Linda saw me looking. She stood up, walked toward me. Greg tried to stop her, but she shook him off. You're destroying this family, she said. Her voice was shaking. Martha would be ashamed of you. I met her eyes. Martha told her nephew the cottage was mine. She said it wasn't yours. You knew that. You came anyway. You tried to take it. She was my sister, and she left everything to me. That was her choice. You don't need it. You're not even using it. We could have made it a home. You could have asked. You could have had a conversation. Instead, you showed up with a truck and tried to steal it. Linda's face crumpled. She turned and walked away. Greg followed her. They left the courtroom without looking back. David and I stood there. The room was empty now except for us and a bailiff organizing papers. They have 7 days, David said. After that, if they're still there, we can involve the RCMP. They'll be forcibly removed. Do you think they'll fight this? File a lawsuit? David shrugged. They might, but they don't have much of a case. The judge made that clear. Unless they come up with something substantial, it's over. 7 days later, Bill called me. They're gone. Left this morning. Took all their stuff. Place looks, well, it's been cleared out. Your furniture's mostly gone. But they're out. I drove up that weekend. The 3-hour drive felt different this time. Not angry, not tense, just heavy. The cottage looked strange when I arrived. Smaller, somehow. Bill met me outside. I took photos of how they left it, he said, in case you need them. Thanks, Bill. Inside, the cottage was gutted. They'd taken everything, not just their stuff. Everything. The furniture, the dishes, even some of the fixtures. Spite, I guessed. One last petty act. I walked through the empty rooms. The living room where Martha and I had hosted Christmas dinners. The bedroom where we'd watched summer storms roll across the lake. The kitchen where she'd made her famous blueberry pancakes. All empty. I sat down on the floor, right there in the living room, and I cried. For the first time since Martha's funeral, I cried. Not quiet tears, big, gasping sobs. For Martha, for the cottage, for the family that had torn itself apart. I don't know how long I sat there. The sun moved across the floor. The light changed. Eventually, I ran out of tears. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the frozen lake. In a few weeks, it would start to thaw. Spring would come. The ice would break apart and drift away. I could rebuild, replace the furniture, bring the cottage back to life. Or I could let it go. Sell it, move on. I didn't know yet. But I had time to decide. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Hey, Uncle Robert. Heard they're out. How are you holding up?" I texted back. "Been better. Been worse. Thanks for your help. Anytime. Aunt Martha would be proud of you. You stood your ground." Would she? I wasn't sure. Martha had always been about family, about keeping the peace. She would have hated this whole thing, but she also would have hated Linda trying to steal our cottage. Another text came in, this one from my brother. Linda called. "She's devastated. Says you've ruined everything." I typed back. "She tried to steal my cottage." "I know. I told her that. She's not speaking to me now either." Family, complicated, messy, sometimes broken beyond repair. I spent the night at the cottage, slept on the floor in a sleeping bag I kept in the truck. It was cold, uncomfortable, but it was mine. In the morning, I made a decision. I would rebuild, replace what they'd taken, bring the cottage back. Not for them, for me, for Martha's memory. Over the next few months, I did exactly that. New furniture, new dishes. I even found some of our old photos in storage, reprinted them, hung them back on the walls. The cottage slowly came back to life. Daniel came to visit in June. We spent a weekend fishing on the lake. He told me about his life in Vancouver, his girlfriend, his job, his plans. Aunt Martha would have loved hearing about all this, he said. She would have. We sat in silence for a while. The lake was calm. The sun was warm. "Do you think you'll ever talk to Linda again?" Daniel asked. I thought about it. I don't know. Maybe. Someday. But not now. Not while she's still claiming she was right. She sent me a message last week. Said I betrayed the family by taking your side. I'm sorry. Don't be. I told the truth. That's all you asked me to do. The summer passed. Slowly. Quietly. I spent most weekends at the cottage. Sometimes alone. Sometimes with friends. My brother came up once. We didn't talk about Linda. We just fished and drank beer and remembered Martha. In September, I got a letter, handwritten, from Linda. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. "Dear Robert, I'm writing because Greg said I should. He says I owe you an apology. I've been thinking about it for months, and I'm still not sure I agree, but I'm writing anyway. I was wrong to move into the cottage without asking. I know that now. Greg and I should have talked to you first, should have had a conversation, but I was hurt. I was grieving. Martha was my sister. When she died, I felt like I lost part of myself. The cottage was the last piece of her I had left. I convinced myself she'd promised it to me. Maybe she implied it. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I just wanted it so badly I heard what I wanted to hear. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. I'm sorry for the legal battle. I'm sorry for taking your furniture. That was petty and wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I regret how things happened. Linda." I read the letter 3 times, sat with it, felt the weight of it. She wasn't admitting she'd been completely wrong, just that she'd handled it badly. It wasn't a full apology, but it was something. I didn't write back. Not yet. Maybe someday, but not yet. Winter came again. The lake froze. I went up to the cottage less often. It was harder to get to in the snow, harder to heat, but I kept it, maintained it, paid the bills. It was mine, Martha's and mine, and I wasn't letting go. On the anniversary of Martha's death, I drove up, brought flowers, stood on the shore of the frozen lake and thought about her. About 32 years of marriage, of building a life together, of the cottage we'd created. I kept it, I said out loud. To the wind, to the lake, to Martha, wherever she was. I kept our place. The wind blew, the ice creaked. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called. I stood there until my fingers went numb. Then I went inside, started a fire, made coffee, sat in Martha's reading chair that I'd replaced. And for the first time in a long time, the cottage felt like home again.